Over these many years, I have tried to be honest and straightforward with you. And from time to time, I share with you the things that I am agitated about. Well, agitation would be an understatement for how I feel this week. I feel nauseous. Have you been keeping up with the protests by pro-Hamas students around the country? They're taking place in New York City. 7,000 pro-Hamas terrorists gathered to show their support for Hamas. So dangerous is the situation, this is hard to believe, that the New York City Police Department, bigger than most armies in the world, told Jewish people to stay home because it might be dangerous for them out there. And indeed, it is dangerous. My niece was at Cooper Union in New York City. She went in for a day to talk to incoming students. And she said that while she was there, some pro-Hamas students chased Jewish students into the library. They had to lock the door. This is America, and we're chasing Jewish people in the greatest city in the world, where the Statue of Liberty is? This should make every one of us nauseous, sick, and disgusted, and it has to stop. Let me do a little bit of an exegesis on the gospel this morning, and then you can connect in your own mind the message for today. Love of God and love of neighbor. Jesus talks about them, and he says they're equal. Love of God and love of neighbor are equal. And some people might say, well, that's new with Jesus. It's new and it's not new. Let me tell you what I mean. You will find in the Old Testament that the Jews are called to love their neighbor. It meant, however, your fellow Jew. It certainly didn't apply to people who were not Jewish. We'll tell you in a few moments a recap of the story of the Good Samaritan, a non-Jew. But what you do have in the Old Testament is the concept of justice. Justice. The Old Testament calls people to be just, even to the aliens that are in your land. Be just to them. Now, justice means you get what you deserve. If we got what we deserved, we'd all go to hell. That's a fact. Love means that you love unconditionally. You get God's love, which is completely gratuitous. It's given as a complete gift. You're not getting something that you deserve. But for the Jew, the idea was that your neighbor is your fellow Israelite. This gospel expands that concept. The whole gospel of Jesus expands that concept because the idea now of neighbor is not just your fellow Israelite, but it's every human being. That is your neighbor, and that is on a par with love of God and love of neighbor. You know, in Matthew's gospel, Matthew says that Jesus told the people, I have come not to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law, to bring it to its fullness. And the fullness is that you love as God has loved us, whether people deserve your love or not. Let's just briefly take a look at the story of the Good Samaritan. You know this story by heart. It's in Luke's gospel. And there's a road from Jericho to Jerusalem, a very, very dangerous road. And there is a Jewish man. He's on his way to Jerusalem, and he is overcome by robbers. Remember the poem we learned in first year of high school? The highwaymen Well, that's what this is. The highwayman comes to rob. That's what happens on this road. And they beat this man up to the point that he's practically dead. And as a matter of fact, he looks pretty dead. And you have the Levite on the road. You have the priest on the road. And they pass the man by. He's a fellow Jew, but they pass him by. Why? Well, maybe it's going to be bothersome. Maybe it'll delay my travels. But quite honestly, it's because if they touch a corpse, they become unclean. And they look dead. They didn't want to become unclean. But then along the road comes a Samaritan. Now remember, the Jews and Samaritans, they hated each other. They hated each other, just like the Palestinians and the Israelis hate each other. Hamas hates the Jews. But this Good Samaritan didn't pass the Jewish man by. He went to him, administered to his wounds, put him on his donkey, and took him to an inn and told the innkeeper, take care of him until I get back. And I'll pay you whatever I owe you. Just take good care of him. Holy cow. Doesn't that turn the tables on what the Jewish people thought about who their neighbor was? First of all, it's a great credit to the Samaritan, the non-Jew. But then you have to think about the Jewish person that was saved and left for dead. It had to change his perspective on who is my neighbor. And all of a sudden, that Samaritan, that Palestinian who he hated all his life, he begins to see him in a different light. See how powerful that is and how it fulfills the teachings of Jesus to fulfill the law. Jesus fulfills everything that the Old Testament had ever spoken about. Let's leave that there for a moment. I want to tell you another little story. About a week ago, we had a conference here, and it was on medical ethics. And I was on a panel with a couple of doctors. And one of the professionals raised their hand, and the question had to do with morality, ethics. What does a nurse do? What does a doctor do? The question was, what do I do in taking care of a homosexual person? What do you do? Honey, are you crazy? That should not even be a question. I said, you take care of that person with dignity and respect. That's what you do. And if they decide they want to grow in holiness, then you call me. Other than that, you take care of that person. Where does a mindset like that come from? Why is this person not to be treated like any other human being? That's not Catholic, it's not Christian, it's not American, and it's not human. If I make my point. Last one is this. I'm sure many of you have seen the movie Gandhi. It must have come out about 25 years ago, maybe more. Ben Kingsley played Gandhi. And there's always a conflict forever between Pakistan and India. Indians are Hindu, Pakistanis are Muslim. And they had a war. Every so often they have a skirmish. And there was a Hindu man who killed a Muslim child. And his conscience began to bother him, and he was tormented. And he went to Gandhi, and he said to him, what can I do? And Gandhi said to him, to the Hindu man, adopt a Muslim child and raise that child as a Muslim. Love of God, love of neighbor, on the same plane. Muslim, Hindu, Catholic, Jew, black, white, homosexual, straight. That's the message of Jesus. Over this past week, I was looking through some pictures on Facebook. And one came up that particularly touched me, and I want to share it with you. I want you just to take a few minutes, maybe a few seconds, and to think about it and to pray over it. And then I'm going to ask you to join me in the words, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on us and on the whole world.